We want to do a quick little show to share our thoughts on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because this is a film that we've been discussing for well over a year. We've been deeply invested and engaged in its development and its production, and we've been waiting for this release for a long, long time. So the payoff has finally arrived. I have seen it 3 times in 3 days, and Adam, you've seen it as well, obviously.
I have. I saw it once. I'm going to let it marinate for me for a little bit before I go do a second viewing, but yeah, I did see it.
Yeah. See, I have no patience. If there's a piece of meat there, I can't give it time to marinate. I got to bite into it again. So were you satisfied? Did it meet your anticipation?
It did. I enjoyed it quite a bit, with some minor reservations. There are a few things about it that are quibbles with the first viewing, but they may not be quibbles when I see it a second time. That's the thing. With a Tarantino movie, sometimes the things that you're not quite sure about the first time, you go back and you rewatch it, and it's like, I'm with that decision. But there were a couple of things in there that it just wasn't quite up to my sensibilities, but there's so much to love about the movie that there's no way I could give it a negative review. I mean, I do like it a lot. I just didn't love it as much as I thought I would. So, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's and by the way, everyone, especially for international audiences where the film hasn't been released yet, I do want to discuss the ending. So this is going to be a spoilerific review. Mm-hmm. Tune out if you have not yet seen it. You know, when you watch it 3 times in a row, you see the seams, you see the transitions, and you tend to see the patterns in the way things are being assembled.
Yeah.
And honestly, the second and third viewings felt a lot faster paced for me than the first viewing, because I think you go in there and you expect it to be another very punchy Tarantino movie, which we've come to expect from every other thing that he's done. And this is different. It's not quite as punchy. It's not nearly as verbose as his other movies. And when you equate Tarantino's number one strength, you typically come up with, a master of dialogue. And I think it's a credit to him that in this film, he found a way to back off from that a little bit, where every scene is not a monologue or a snappy exchange. He challenged himself in a different way, totally subverting a lot of expectations, because if you recall, which I know you do, when he announced this movie, glorifying the killers and to leave it to Tarantino, he'll really pull in the reins to respect Sharon Tate and everyone, and one thing after another. And he's making a Manson movie, and you couldn't convince anyone that those weren't his intentions. And those people are silent now, or they're nitpicking and finding some other way to call him a misogynistic pig.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is very true. Well, first of all, the first 15 minutes of the movie, or 15, 20 minutes, I don't know, something like that, I felt like it was Brad Pitt and DiCaprio had directed it themselves almost. It just felt like they were doing their own thing, and in a great way. I mean, it was fantastic. I loved what their business in the early going, probably about the first 30 minutes, actually. Just really, really good stuff. And you were talking about his maturity as a filmmaker. I thought it was interesting that for the first time that I can recall, and if I'm missing something, please correct me, but I don't recall him ever having a dog or a child in a previous movie, which he does prominently. Right. In this movie. That's something different that we've not seen in a Tarantino movie. And both the child and the dog, the scenes involving both, they are very important in this movie. And so I thought that was a little bit of step in a different direction for him. For me,
Yeah.
I felt something there.
Very much so. And I will say, in terms of because the casting of this thing, I took it as he wanted it to resemble one of those, not necessarily an Irwin Allen, but in that vein, where it's just an assemblage of all of these recognizable faces.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them don't necessarily have fleshed out roles.
Right.
They come on, you see them, it's almost a special appearance by blah, blah, blah. And, of course, they're all good because they're all great actors. But I tell you what, of the side performances, that little girl, Julia Butters, I think is her name, was really sensational. And she totally held her own with Leonardo DiCaprio, and what I think is one of the movie's best scenes, where she kind of exposes his insecurities.
That was good stuff. True.
Dakota Fanning as Squeaky was very effective. I thought Margaret Qualley was great. Was a great find. And Pacino does his job at the beginning, but
Yeah, he was doing it and doing it quite well. I loved it. We heard these rumors of this great monologue scene that was cut. Do you think it's something different beyond this scene that we have? Because he's got a pretty good sizable monologue here at the beginning of the film, but we've heard rumors about another a monologue that was cut. So I'm wondering if that was the one that was reinstated, or if there's another one that we haven't seen, or we might see in the DVD extras or something.
I have a feeling there must be a lot of deleted stuff in this movie, because whole cast members were cut out of it, and I saw publicity shots of Pacino sitting in the back of a limo or some kind of car, and this was not necessarily a publicity shot, even though there is one of him in the back of a car. This was actually behind the scenes, somebody on the street as they were shooting, and Pacino was sitting in the back of a car. So I assumed there was a big scene in a car that maybe they cut out, but I don't know for sure. But I'm sure there are lots of things that will end up in a Blu-ray, hopefully.
Yeah, well, he did say, and I saw this in an interview, he did say that his original everything but the kitchen sink cut was 4 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So he did say that. So that means there's basically another movie that we're not seeing, an hour and 40 minutes worth of footage. That constitutes almost an entire other movie. So I don't know if all that will show up. It seems like he's been doing a lot more judicious trimming. I know The Hateful Eight is now on Netflix in a extended version that's about 40 minutes longer. So apparently there was quite a bit of stuff that was trimmed from that as well that has been reinstated. So I don't know. It seems like he's cutting away a lot of stuff. He's filming more than he's using here in these last couple of films, and this seems like a trend maybe that he's on for whatever reason. But I knew with 6 months of filming that movie, there had to be a lot of stuff. There had to be,
And in terms of photography, because I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to write Robert Richardson a letter, an email. I don't write letters anymore. I'm not Abraham Lincoln. But I remember the last time I did that was for Django. And so I'll send him another congratulatory email this time around, because I think his work is really stunning in a way that totally complements the movie, and yet there's nothing show-offy about it necessarily that draws attention to itself. But it does aid in fully immersing you in that world. And there's something very special about the color scheme, the burnished oranges and blues, and the lower lit scenes, particularly towards the end. In DiCaprio's house at the end sequence. It's very dark, but it's lit in a way that's almost dreamlike. and to get that kind of balance is amazing. And there's a gorgeous shot of close up of Sharon Tate while she's driving the Porsche. And I think it's Judy Collins singing on the soundtrack.
Actually,
but,
I was going to get to that. It's actually Buffy St. Marie, The Circle Game is the name of the song.
Okay.
And that's fantastic. I love that sequence. Yeah, I was going to say, the song he chose for that, and the cinematography is just, that was one of my favorite individual scenes in the movie. I love that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's close on her face, and she's just flawless and happy and hopeful, and then she pulls over to pick up the hitchhiker. Then there's individual shots that I just adore. There's a close-up of Squeaky. You see the screen door up against her face, and it's close up on her face. That's one of the most menacing images in the movie.
Yeah.
And then there's the shot that I absolutely want to live in. And it's only on screen for literally like 2 seconds. And it's the very first glimpse you have of Margot Robbie. It's at the very beginning. It's the song "Treat Her Right" is playing, and the camera pans up from inside the steps of the Pan Am airplane, and she's in there with a big group dancing in the plane, and then it just, as soon as it registers, it kind of shuts off, and I'm like, no, hold a little longer. I want to live in that moment. Hang on. But it's and there's a lot of aerial stuff. There's a lot of stuff shot from up in the air, looking down, and I'm not sure thematically if that was intentional to kind of bring out the resonance of this looking back, kind of from a certain perspective or not, or if it was just a matter of getting all the information in one frame of the way they've transformed things, but. But that's also impressive, and the amount of driving in the movie. I mean, the LA is a driving culture. It's a car culture. Right. It always has been. So, and I thought those driving scenes were magnificent, and especially, I loved when Brad Pitt first leaves DiCaprio's house and said, "You don't need anything else. I'm going to take off." And he gets in his car, and you see him drive out of Cielo, and then cuts, and he's driving through Hollywood Boulevard with just great music. I mean, speeding through Hollywood Boulevard, and then he's on the freeway, and then he goes off to show that, look, Pitt exists in this world in a peripheral sense, the Hollywood glamour world.
Yeah. But
he doesn't live anywhere near Hollywood. He's one of those guys that works in town, but he lives way outside of town. And, and I like the amount of time that they spent showing that journey to establish that about him.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I guess we could talk about the musical selections. I mean, I thought, music in general in the movie is pretty important. I think it's interesting how the movie, it almost reminds you of American Graffiti, the way the music is also a character in the film. I think it just runs. Every character has a radio going just constantly. There's a constant stream of music in the background, and some of the musical choices that he makes are quite interesting. I noticed towards the end of the movie he put in this version of Out of Touch by the Rolling Stones, which one of my favorite songs by the Rolling Stones, but it was a version that I'd never heard before, and I had to come home and do some research, and I realized why. I thought, well, it sounds like the same song, the same recording, but there's something different. I can't figure out what it is, and I came home and did some research, and I found out there was an alternate version recorded where they added strings to it. That's why it sounded different to my ears, that there's strings in there that weren't in the original hit version. So I just think that's interesting, little touches like that, with the music, that he could have gone for the tired and worn out, single version, but no, he goes for an alternate version of the same of the song that we know, but he tweaks it a little bit by getting something just slightly different, and putting a new twist on it.
It is amazing, his musical choices and I mean, there's so many great tunes in the movie, but what most struck me musically was how he sources film scores again, especially at the very last scene. There's an instrumental. There's an instrumental, and it's a piece of score from Maurice Jarre from The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean. And it's like, what a random selection of film score. But, oh, my God, it just works so beautifully. And what he did, and you're right, the music and the radio, because you spend so much time in your car, and so it's also a radio culture, L.A. And that's the through line in the movie, is that radio. And what happened was, I forget the call letters of the radio station, KH something. I didn't grow up in Los Angeles, but it was a popular radio station in LA back at that time, and he found people who had actually physically audio recorded broadcasts from that radio station in that year. And he found 14 hours of it, and he just started listening to it. And then that inspired him to come up with the idea, well, this is like the ongoing, this is almost like the narrator throughout the course of the movie. It would be a great through line. And he discovered some of those songs from those tracks that they played on those radio recordings. Which is, in the commercials and everything. Above all else, it's a great L.A. movie. It's going to take its place in the pantheon of great L.A. movies, I think, and great period movies, great movies about making movies and television. I mean, there's a lot of boxes that this movie fits into.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, the technical, of course we knew that the technical details were going to be phenomenal, and they do not disappoint. Even the benches have the names of the local anchors at that time in Los Angeles. So whatever the nightly news anchors were, they're advertised on the benches on the streets, which, just little details like that you really pick up on. Just amazing. So, on one level, it's so fantastic because if you want to be transported, because you and I feel the same way, we wish that we could have been alive and lived out in Southern California during that period of time, and this is the best opportunity we're going to have to experience that is in this movie, because you are transported to another world, and it's it's that. So if you want to live in 1969 Los Angeles, well, this is your movie and this is your opportunity. So I want to stress that to people, if that's something that appeals to you, if for no other reason, even if you don't give 2 cents about the story, you will be transported. Let's just put it that way.
And I think some people feel that way. I read one comment from someone who watched the movie with a grandfather or father or something, and he said it was akin to watching the Private Ryan with a World War II veteran, and they come out shaking because they feel like they've re-experienced something. I mean, it was vivid. And he said, look, my father and grandfather, they lived there during that year, and they just walked out saying, how did they replicate it? I mean, from a tactile sense. It transcends the refurbishing of buildings and signs and stuff. It's just it feels right, they say.
Yep. Absolutely. It really does. And so they got all of that right, and that's kudos to the production team for that, because it is an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, it is.
In terms
that being
of what
said, I mean, there are. I mean, the Playboy Mansion was not opened until 1971.
Yes,
but,
that's correct.
Which brings up an interesting point: Tarantino's relationship with factual history, which I appreciate because I take it at face value. Even when he veers from it, he's not far from the truth. It's based in some semblance of what actually occurred. So Polanski and Sharon Tate, there's a famous interview with them in the Playboy After Dark show, and they're sitting there with Hugh Hefner. So it's not far removed from what would eventually be the Playboy Mansion, but that interview happened in, I think, their Chicago nightclub, because they had not yet purchased the Playboy Mansion when they did that interview. But
That's correct.
It's 1 degree away, and you don't want to. If you can get the Playboy Mansion in California, and it's another big set piece, and it provides an excuse to get all of these stars together, then you do it.
That's right. But some of the factual stuff he's absolutely correct about, like the scene where Charles Manson shows up at their door, looking for Terry Melcher.
And yet he's not correct on it, and he knows he's not correct on it, because Charles Manson, Jay Sebring, I don't think Jay Sebring was there, but even if he was, he wasn't the one that talked to Manson. He wasn't the one that encountered Manson. And it wasn't at the front of the house. It was in the back by the pool. But that's the one problem I had with it. And thankfully, Manson's only in it for 10, 15 seconds.
Yeah, he's not long.
And it is a good scene. And there's that great image of Manson looking over Jay Sebring's shoulder to see Sharon in the doorway. Manson looks way too manicured. He looks like
I agree.
He just bought that stuff out of a Sears catalog or something. And Manson was a scrawny, vagabond.
Yeah, he looks like Jay Sebring just gave him a haircut, basically. That's what I thought about. So anyway, yeah. So I
but
agree.
He's only in it for a few seconds, and it's fine. And the movie assumes that you come to it with a certain amount of knowledge.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
If you don't, that you'll like the movie enough to be inspired to actually look up the real events that the movie is referencing. So I can see, and I know it's happened, I can see a lot of people walking into this movie and being totally confused by a good chunk of it, not knowing what the hell is happening. I mean, the case in point, there was one person who said that he was in the theater when Manson walked into the house, and Sharon Tate had just mentioned Jim Morrison. So would your client Jim Morrison be upset that I'm listening to Paul Revere and the Raiders or whatever? And then you see Manson walking behind her through the window, and somebody in the audience thought that was Jim Morrison.
Huh.
So I mean, but you can't make movies for the lowest common denominator, and absolutely what we've been pushing for so many years on this show is, man, you underestimate you make movies for stupid people. Make movies for smart people. Make movies that you want to go back and look into more and figure out more of its history and that kind of thing that it deals with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's and this is a movie that I know in years to come it's gonna be a repeat performer in my household. I know that for a fact. I knew that when I saw it. And even though I have some reservations about a few things, a few minor quibbles, I guess, it's still something that I'm going to return to. And I know. And
then leaving, the end of it, the Kasabian character leaving them, deserting them.
Yeah.
Obviously, that didn't happen. But by the same token, the next night at La Bianca's, the killers were left, and they had to hitch a ride back to the ranch. And also, I understand why he did that, because he has to figure out what to do with the fourth person, Kasabian, who was not in the house, did not commit any murders. He has to figure out what to do with her, and if she's like she was in reality, out by the car, you have to account for that somehow. Yeah. What do you want Brad Pitt to do? Run out to the car and kill the girl and walk by? I mean, you don't want to do that. So you got to find a way to get rid of her. So I understand narratively why he chose to have her take off.
Sure.
There are little things like that the more you know the actual story, the better it plays, because you see how clever he is in manipulating certain elements.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, well, a minor quibble that I had was I feel like there were a couple of scenes in the movie that did run a little bit long for my taste. They just seemed to ramble on a little bit longer than I kind of got antsy a time or two. So that was a minor quibble. Just a few, when they get into the sequence where he's on the Western TV show where he has his breakdown. The breakdown stuff was really intriguing and fascinating, but then it went on after that a little bit long, I thought, to the point where they were almost having an episode of a TV show in the middle of the movie, and I thought, they could have trimmed that just a little bit. I believe made it a little tighter, and that would have that might have worked a little better. And maybe I'll feel differently, like I said, a second time out. But that was just my own preference. Some people are going to dig it and think that it's perfect length, but that was just me, and I realized that. And then the ending of it, as we were going to say, and here comes spoiler alert. Of course, he does rewrite history as he did in Inglourious Bastards, and I don't know how I'm not quite sure how I feel about that still. It's almost played as a dark comedy instead of this grand tragedy. And the audience I was with were laughing hysterically. I mean, they were laughing just out of their minds with laughter. And I don't know, it's such a somber thing that happened. And I guess I, have just lived with that for so many years. It's hard for me to switch my emotional gears and get on board with this whole thing being turned into just a dark comedy as it is in the movie, and I had a little bit of a problem with that. I have to admit. I mean, it was entertaining as hell, and I did laugh as well. But then when it was over with, I thought, emotionally, he could have really amped up the drama with this. I mean, there's a number of ways he could have gone with it. He could have had the Brad Pitt character out walking the dogs, and he hears these screams, and he runs up to jumps the fence or whatever, and runs up to the house, and he could catch them right in the middle of what really happened or something like that. There are all kinds of dramatic possibilities that really could have made it kept it in tone with what really happened, and still insert these fictional characters into the proceedings that I think might have worked a little better. But it is what it is. And again, I might feel differently on a second viewing, but I had a little problem with that. I have to admit. So,
well, as you know, I've lived and been horrified by beasts. They're unspeakable. It just you can't fathom what the atmosphere must have been like in that house that night, and the totality of what was taken that night. But so I was trepidatious about the ending too, and then I saw the ending, and I absolutely loved it because this is a fantasy version.
Yes.
And we have lived with 50 years of these boogeymen and women going into this home and massacring everyone. And he completely took the spit out of him. I mean, I loved, I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's business. No, it was dumber than that. I love that he totally removed the venom out of, because these people, these killers have gained this notoriety and legendary status somehow in the culture. But what I was particularly taken by was the very end, because and every single time I've seen it, I walk out of the theater just crying because the ending is so incredibly, intensely moving to me that the ending allows Rick Dalton the chance that has been eluding him, possibly. But it also, of course, it's a fairy tale ending for Sharon Tate and everyone else in that house that night. And to be able to contemplate that alternate reality where this beautiful 8.5-month pregnant woman at the cusp of a career and the prime of her life did not end up stabbed to death crying for her mother. That's incredibly moving to me. And yet another moment that I wanted to live in forever. And by portraying a rosier outcome, I think it really brings the horror of what actually happened. It makes it even more palpable, because you do get a sense of, you do really get a sense of what was lost. And Sharon Tate, the way she's portrayed in the movie, I do think we could have seen more of her. But I understand what he was using her for. She's kind of this lovely specter in the movie that kind of hangs over the movie. She's the idealism and the hope and the promise and the light that represents the best, the dreams of that world. And then you have DiCaprio as the alternate version of that. Someone whose life is really pretty good, but they're so consumed with status and all this kind of stuff that they can't enjoy their life and their success.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Sharon Tate is so open and beautiful and radiant. And when the girl at the box office wants to take a photo of her, she's like, no, stand by the poster so people will know who you are. And she's like, okay, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I do feel like I could have possibly seen more of her, but she needs to be an idea in this movie.
Yeah,
I think it's the best ending I've ever seen in a movie, and because it gets me every time I see it, and I can't stop replaying that moment in my mind. And and it's amazing to me how he switched gears so quickly between the violence in that next to last scene to just totally tender sweetness in the very last scene of the movie. I mean, from one scene to the next, he's totally shifted gears, and it played effortlessly to me. It made total sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I enjoyed it while it was playing out, but I think my expectations were for something that just didn't happen, and it's probably my own personal baggage, because I was kind of ramped up for more of a dramatic ending that just didn't happen, and that's my own personal cross to bear, so to speak. But the end of it, where everybody kind of lives happily ever after, that was nice. It is a nice touch, the way they show them all walking off at the end there. So and I can see where you're coming from with all that. Yeah, absolutely. So all of that is valid, everything you just said. So yeah, totally makes sense. But
his use of California Dreamin', when she's walking out of the theater, and we're entering a new chapter now. It feels very wistful and haunting, as does that final music. That's what really gets me about that final music from Maurice Jarre. It's both wistful and haunting.
Yeah, good.
Which I think in general that's what the movie is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, it's like I said, there's a lot to like about it, and even though I do have some minor reservations, I will see it again. I can't wait to own a copy of it, and I would highly recommend our listeners, to see it. If you haven't, if you're on the fence and you're thinking, well, it's just another Tarantino movie, I definitely would strongly recommend people to see it, because there's so much to enjoy about it, and so that's my final verdict.
DiCaprio's great. He and what surprised me is he adopts this stutter. Because psychologically he is so tormented about the shape of his career and what might have been and where he is, that it expresses itself in the stammering that he has. He's such a confident actor, and he's willing to do things like that hullabaloo scene, which is just hysterical.
Oh, that was great. That was so great. Yes, totally.
Which I do really like the cutting in that opening scene with Ian Pacino, where they're going through the beats of Rick Dalton's career. I don't think the opening narration is necessary when Kurt Russell chimes in with one line about how Rick was pulled over for a DUI, and that's why Cliff Booth has to drive him. It made more sense for there to be the narrator towards the end, because there was a lot of explaining to do. But that opening narration was just distracting because it came out of nowhere and then it disappeared. You didn't hear from it again for another hour and a half.
That's true. Yeah, that was a little odd. I'll give you that.
All the detail, and Brad Pitt obviously is getting the bulk of the love for this movie because he's iconic in this movie. He's got a lot of great moments, and so he's rightfully praised for this performance. He's very great, very good in it. But Tom Cruise would have been good as well. And when thinking about Tom Cruise, it pisses me off because Tom Cruise had first dibs on that role, and maybe there are other reasons why he passed it up, but he should not have passed it up, even if it meant Top Gun 2. Top Gun 2 would have taken a little bit longer. I'm tired of him making kiddie movies.
Yeah, me too. He's such a great actor.
And passing up the opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. He would have been perfect for it as well, and it would have done a lot for him as an actor. But he doesn't seem necessarily so interested in that anymore.
No, and it's kind of sad. It really is. Well, it's not kind of. It is sad. Let's just say it. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Totally.
Anyway, so I do have little problems with it. I've already talked about, and it doesn't totally congeal for me. There's one great sequence after another, but when you put all this tapestry together, it doesn't quite gel as solidly as I'd like it to. But
I agree. That's a good point.
But I do think between this and Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Bastards, I think that's the grand trifecta in Tarantino's career so far.